Lovely. So there's Mahler. Everybody needs some intro music. How's my voice? Does that sound okay? Louder? Louder? Ooh. How about now? Closer? Okay. Okay? Hello? Hello? Okay. So this is my intro music. It's the third movement from Mahler's Third Symphony. And Mahler had this little title that he got rid of later, but the idea is that this piece of music is what Mahler was listening to the creatures around Toblach, and it's what the creatures of the forest tell me. What do they tell you? And Mahler killed the birds. And we'll get back to that later, but that's something to think about. Mahler killing the birds, okay? He did. Okay, so a bit of interaction first. So there's a question there. Who uses hearing as a research tool? Can you want to stick up your hands if you use your hearing apparatus as a primary research, or even a secondary research tool in what you do? Anybody doesn't? Second question, do you consider your hearing as normal? Yeah? Good hearing? Acute? In English we call it acute hearing. Do you have acute hearing? Not cute hearing, but acute hearing. Yeah? Who doesn't think they've got normal hearing? Oh, okay. So yeah, this is something I want to talk about, and I have this term aural typical, which I'm kind of heading towards. And this talk is also a kind of preparation for the sound installation that you might experience tonight if you happen to go to the toilets at Radar. So we're heading towards this. So you need to warn me, or otherwise I've run out of time to talk about it. So what I want to talk about is hearing, and I haven't been to every single presentation because I had to rush to sort out my installation, but I got a feeling that most of your presentations have been what I call aural typical. You naughty people. So I guess I have to explain what that is. But I think it's problematic that you're being aurotypical, because everyone who put out their hands saying that they don't have normal hearing is already admitting that they aren't aurotypical. Mahler's still playing. Let's stop him. Okay, but first, one slide to talk about the wonders of sound. Here's baby Toby, and he's just had cochlear implants inserted into his cochlea, and they're turned on for the first time. You can see this stuff on YouTube and etc. if you're that way inclined, and you see them, they're turned on for the first time, and he hears his mother's voice, and his face is transformed, and he opens up into the world. It's magic. It's marvelous. It's fantastic. He's suddenly connected to the world from being this kind of slightly disinterested child. We need to remember a lot how important sound is in our lives and in the world and connection of our lives. A quick backstory to this stuff, and I know some people have heard me doing my hand dryer talk before, so I'll go through it quickly. There's a kind of extended hand dryer discussion. But if you Google hand dryer and noise, I'm one of the first names that comes up, which is a great fame. This is from the Mail, the English newspaper, the Mail. This is the online version of it, and I had my moment of fame when they got excited. What's the feedback? They got excited about my hand dryer research. And if you see that picture there, there's a little. So the title says super fast hand dryers have same impact on ear as road drill. Okay, that was the headline, which is true. They do. But an editor, during the day, they had a picture of a Dyson Airblade on the website, and an editor got nervous during the day, so they took down the picture of the Dyson Airblade and they replaced it with this more anonymous hand dryer. And an editor wrote underneath that saying, well, I can't read it. It says, John Drever says hand dryers damage your hearing. Okay, and I never said hand dryers damage your hearing. Now, so that's one of the things I want to talk about, is that often when we talk about noise issues, we get obsessed with hearing damage. And that's really important, hearing damage. We need to be aware of it. But I want to talk about other issues to do with loudness. A little bit more about the hand dryer stuff. I became a dad. I've got 2 lovely children. Here they are. They're my research assistants. It's my son. He's you can see he's not happy. He's very he's still quite noise intolerant. And that's my daughter, Astrid. Nice Danish, kind of Norwegian sounding name, isn't it? A Scandic name. Astrid there. Now she loves loud hand dryers, but she loves being terrified. Okay. So there's different kinds of people in the world. There's the kind of sensory avoidance and the sensory seekers. And little Astrid she's a sensory seeker. She wants to be terrified. But anyhow, very quickly, the hand dryer issue. There's a hand dryer there. A little sign is caution, loud when in use, known to startle children. Anyway, basically, I did the proper acoustic studies. There we are. I did particularly around Dyson Airblade. I did the sound power tests. I won't bore you too much with this stuff. But I first had to prove, I'm also a qualified acoustician, so I first had to prove with the data that hand dryers are loud. And I did all the classic acoustic tests to do that. And yes, they are loud. But the loudness is part of the branding. There you are. It's all about kind of militarized power. It's Airblade, Air Force, Air Fury, Jet Towel, Tornado, Typhoon. You know, it's. And when I first did my hand dryer talk, I did it in Munich at an ambience conference. I think someone was there at this conference. And afterwards, all these German men came up to me and said, "We don't understand what you're talking about. We love the Dyson Airblade. We will queue up to use it." So these are the people that I call, these are the neurotypical people that I'm not interested. I'll move on a bit, but there's all this hand dryer stuff. And they're loud. And here's a quote from actually Dyson, one of Dyson's team talking about a vacuum cleaner. But this is the kind of language they use. They're saying, yeah, why are you complaining about the sound? It's the fan goes at 35,000 RPM. Schumacher's Ferrari does 19,000. So why are you complaining? Your vacuum cleaner's fan is faster than the Ferrari. So why would you complain? Which is a certain kind of mentality. And the other issue was, not only did I do acoustic tests of the hand dryers themselves, and actually I've studied lots of hand dryers now, but I also did acoustic studies of the space where you put the hand dryers, which is basically the most reverberant space that we actually go to in our lives, which is the toilet. Every surface is reflective. And the most extreme data I found really was that due to reflection, it was equivalent to having 19 Dyson Airblades in an anechoic chamber. So the hand dryer was being multiplied 19 times due to the reflection of the toilet, which is one interesting way of thinking about it. Anyway, there's that acoustic side of it. But more importantly for us, and especially through the media interest, a lot of people started to find me. People of sensitive hearing or carers who have noise issues. And particularly, I particularly folded this up in the autistic spectrum community, and I've had a lot of data from people on the autistic spectrum talking about hand dryer loudness, and then they also started talking about flush loudness as well, especially the modern flush or the suction flush. It turned out to be a huge problem, and I could go on about the hand dryer stuff for ages, and I'll talk about the Danish hand dryer near the end. But what I'd kind of discovered, which I'd never realized before, is that there's lots of people who've got very sensitive hearing in this world. And me being a kind of artist who works with sound, I'd never thought about that before. I'd always had this neurotypical way of thinking about sound. And as I said earlier, it's not just a device. It's also the acoustics. And it's not... What was interesting about the toilet issue was there was actually a number of sonic issues. I was on a panel with Thomas Heverwick, the architect, and I was talking about hand dryers, and he said, "We've just built the best toilet in the world in Hong Kong." And I was like, "Oh, really? That's nice." So I was in Hong Kong, in my glamorous life, and I went to the best toilet in the world in Hong Kong. There it is. And it looked beautiful, but there was this thing here. There was a little metallic bin, and you've got metal hitting metal in a reverberant space, and it looked beautiful, but it was a kind of sonic disaster. It's extraordinary how you would overlook that. All it needs is a little bit of rubber, and then you're sorted. Amazingly, Stockhausen was aware of these things. Stockhausen, talking about toilet sounds, he actually devised using noise cancellation to have a sound swallower in toilets, to mask toilet sounds. Isn't that extraordinary? And one of the things he dreamed of, and we have these kind of things. But one of the first conferences I went to do toilets was at a women's design series, and I was the only man at this conference, and I was desperate to talk about hand dryers. So I had my moment. I put my hand up, and I made my little statement about hand dryers, and then this woman turned round to me and told me I was a pervert. You know, you pervert, you want silent toilets, which I hadn't thought about before. And of course, in Japan, ladies from Japan here will know that Japanese ladies have they've had noise masking devices in toilets for hundreds of years. He's from the Edo period, a toilet sound masking device. So the point I'm making is that actually it's not just about, these things get very complex, and the toilet becomes a kind of soundscape macrocosm, so it's about composing the toilet. It's not just about, if you take away the sound of the hand dryer, then other privacy sounds become an issue, and so on. It's very complex. Here's one answer, is the hand towel, but of course that's expensive, isn't it? Or is it? Anyway, I'm not going to go there. But okay, let's moving on. More importantly, so just talking about hearing for a minute, and yeah, my data says something like, hand dryers as loud as a road drill, so it's up into the 100 decibel area. But what does a decibel mean? And these are A-weighted decibels. So what's an A-weighted decibel? Who can tell me what an A-weighted decibel is? Won't bother you. But A-weighted decibels is one of the primary units used in almost all acoustic standards. Not for actually industrial noise. When you look at industrial noise, you have a different kind of weighting. For like aircraft noise, it's a different weighting, but A-weighted is the standard thing. You get A-weighted decibels from the equal loudness contours, which are these things. So that's how, and basically the equal loudness contours gives you a model of the human ear and how the human ear responds to different frequencies. Yeah, how it's perceived different loudnesses at different frequencies, and we have this kind of map that A-weighted decibels is derived from. But how do you get equal loudness contours? Well, you go into an anechoic chamber and you hear a tone at one frequency, and then you hear the same frequency at an octave lower, and you tell the assistant at the other side outside the anechoic chamber to adjust the levels so you hear them at equal loudnesses. Now, in the international standard, to do this test, you have to have someone who's called otologically normal, or otologically normal. This could be also the same term as aural typical, as otologically normal. And it says a person in a normal state of health who is free from signs or symptoms of ear disease and from obstructing wax in the ear canals and has no history of undue exposure to noise, exposure to potentially ototoxic drugs, or familiar hearing loss, which is probably most of us. But interestingly, it's between the ages of 18 to 25. Yeah? So anybody who put up their hands earlier, who's over the age of 25, who said they've got acute hearing or normal hearing, well, according to this model, you're not. By the time you're 25, your hearing is already screwed. And we have this thing called presbycusis, this age-related hearing loss, which is treated as something natural. But of course, there's interesting stories of the tribesman in the Sudan in his 70s who's got the hearing of a young person from the West. So it's interesting, these assumptions. And in the world of acoustics, you basically, when you work with acousticians, they are all obsessed with like we're all going deaf. They're obsessed, we're all deaf. You don't need to worry about old people because they're deaf. It's this very limited way about thinking about hearing. Interesting, I've worked with two ladies in their 90s, and for them the world's too loud. They don't go out because the world's too loud. They can't cope with it. They watch the television with the sound turned off because it's too loud. As a result, I got a huge list of people that I came across that had particular hearing needs and sensitive hearing. There's a WHO list, and I've kind of elaborated on it. But these are kind of particular people whose hearing doesn't fall in the normal range. So you've got children and infants in general, the elderly in general, particular diseases, high blood pressure issues, people dealing with complex cognitive tasks such as Mahler trying to compose, visual impairment. You need your aural cues to navigate around the toilet. Hearing aid users, it's a huge problem. Hearing aid users, hearing impairment, and then you've got this really interesting bunch of things: hyperacusis, misophonia, phonophobia, and recruitment. So hyperacusis is a really fascinating hearing condition that I've got more and more involved with. And I went to a hyperacusis conference, and after every paper, we didn't clap. We had to wave our hands because we were told, and I was going to play some hand dryer sounds in my talk, and the guy at the conference said, "You crazy? You're going to play hand dryer sounds? We've got people with hyperacusis here. What are you, a monster?" But hyperacusis is a very debilitating condition where basically your threshold of pain drops right down. Going back to this a minute, so pain, according to the Institute of Acoustics, is 140 decibels. If you've got hyperacusis, pain could be 60 decibels, and it's not a source. It doesn't matter what the source is, but your pain threshold drops right down. And now we've found pain receptors that go from the lower cochlea to the brain. That's quite new news now. So there's more kind of evidence this is real pain. Yep. And you've got other things like tinnitus, and I'm a tinnitus sufferer now. So and my tinnitus is affected by all kinds of things, including noise. I think most of us have got tinnitus. Everyone. And actually, weirdly, the sound world and composers are full of hearing issues. It's extraordinary. I think there's more people in our kind of world who've got hearing issues than most industries, for a number of reasons. Then misophonia. Misophonia is super interesting. Do we have any misophonia sufferers here? So misophonia, I was on a bus recently in South London, and a kid opened a packet of crisps and started eating this crisp. And this woman said, "You've got to stop that. I can't. The sound of crisps is going to make me go crazy." So misophonia is actually source dependent. It's about, and it's particularly having a very strong emotional response to quiet sounds, particularly sounds involving the mouth. Like, if you had misophonia and I did that, you'd punch me in the face. You say sorry afterwards, probably, unless I did it in a nasty kind of way, I guess. So it's quite, and in fact, I've had quite a few misophonia sufferer students, and they've made pieces, misophonia pieces. It's really super interesting. And then you've got autism. But autism is interesting because you've got an autism, you've got hyper and hypo. So you've got, say, of the hand dryers, you've got people who are obsessed with sound, who will spend all day at the hand dryer, and then you've got the autistic people who will be very, very terrified and would be feeling pain, etc. I can go on about this stuff, but let's move on. And then there's all the from noise, there's all the kind of hormonal issues. So you've got cortisol and adrenaline release, because ultimately, say if you go into a toilet and the background level is something like 45 A-weighted decibels, you accidentally trigger the hand dryer and you immediately go up to 100 decibels. So the healthy response is to have a fight or flight response. That's the correct human response. And you'll have adrenaline will be pumped, or cortisol will be pumped through your body. That is the normal situation, which is odd. It's an odd scenario. And then this is interesting, I want to be careful here, but I came across estrogen levels actually affects your sensitivity to hearing and also to memory. This is quite new research as well. And also the lack of estrogen can affect your hearing. When I was studying acoustics, part of it's about training environmental health officers. And say you go around to a house and someone's been complaining about low frequency noise. We were told that the most common demographic is women over the age of 50. Which is interesting. And the problem with environmental health officers is that you can't hear the low frequency noise. And what happens is that actually people become sensitized. We're obsessed with desensitization. We think if you live in the city, you become desensitized to noise. But there are lots and lots of examples where you become sensitized. It's the opposite. We could be really careful. You could dig up any book in psychology that talks about exposure to noise. It all says you get desensitized. I don't know where they get that from. It's really tricky. And then there's people like this chap, a new kind of chap here. It says, I don't know if you can see that, there's an American veteran. It says, combat veteran lives here. Please be courteous with fireworks. Yeah, so that's kind of trauma, someone with trauma. And interestingly, there's been a really interesting study after the marathon bombing because in one moment, lots of people got hearing damage in a very short space of time, which has become a nice source of data, especially with hyperacusis and tinnitus. And there's interesting results coming out of that. And of course, we use culture, we use noise in different cultural situations. This is Hong Kong in New Year. And of course, it's a really noisy time. They're obsessed with noise. And of course, there's Nian. Do you know the story? Because the reason they make noise is because they have this monster comes out in springtime from the mountains and from the water, and he's going to eat children, but he's got hyperacusis. So that's why you have firecrackers to scare him away. Yes, there you go. And don't worry about that. This is about it's about Mr. Man. Mr. Quiet lives in Loudland. Mr. Quiet's a hyperacusis sufferer. I'm going to jump some slides, but this is about schools and earlids. I do sound walking a lot, but quite often after I do a sound walk, and I do the classic Murray Schafer style of kind of silent, non-speaking sound walk for a long period of time, and quite often at the end, people have actually been quite upset. And here's a quote from a woman who did one of my walks. She says, "What happened was a sensory overload. In paying attention to the sound environment, I was drawn to find different objects the sound was coming from rather than filtering them out, like I usually do. Then I began to see narratives emerging around the actions in relation to the context. But there were so many that I got completely exhausted. It was one fragment after another, and all the sounds began to have an equal importance, so I couldn't filter events. By the time we got to the cafe, I was really quite upset on the verge of tears, as if the world was too full of everything." Yeah? And this is the kind of Murray Schafer ear cleansing exercise. But actually, what do we send? So, and it's, yes, she's been, in some sense, her filtering of her normal filtering habits have kind of fallen down a bit, but the sound is pouring into her ears now. So it's funny when we do these we're all obsessed with being sensitive hearers, but it's tricky, it's complex stuff. Okay, so they've got this arotypical term I've got, which is a bit like otologically normal, and it comes off the idea of the neurotypical. In autism, in autistic community, they talk about non-autistic people as being neurotypical. But I think we have to, in the field we work in, we have to be kind of aware about how we think about hearing, because there is so many hearing issues. Even if I have a cold, I might lose 10 dB. If I have a migraine, I might gain 10 dB of sensitivity. Our hearing's changing all the time. It's very unreliable. But we treat hearing as kind of idealized and generalized, and because it's easier that way. And we do this, it's in our theories, it's in how we talk about this stuff. This is Jonathan Stern talking about sound studies, saying basically the same point. And part of it's to do with all this weird kind of phonology stuff we use, going from P.A. Schaeffer, and here's Don Ida talking. And of course, Don Ida has this lovely book called Listening and Voice, his great phenomenology book. And he made that when he was a young, healthy, otologically normal man. But when the book was republished in 2007, he was an older man who was wearing hearing aids. His phenomenology doesn't work anymore. Now, that book didn't say, this is a phonology for men aged 20 of good hearing. But maybe it's treated as kind of cosmic and universal. And then you could start, when you take this arotypical or aurodiverse approach, then you can start looking at people like Kafka. And you start reading Kafka. Kafka in Kafka's letters and books, he was obsessed with noise. Noise is a nightmare for him. He could never, it's torment. I've been going to lots of stuff in this, but anyway, moving on to the kind of sounder world, music world, I kind of was reminded of this amazing paper by Milton Babbitt called Who Cares If You Listen, which got an ultimate modernist statement about listening to music, and it's extraordinary. He's talking about, shall I read this quickly? Basically, he's saying that you have to have these amazing bionic ears to listen to modernist music properly. And if you don't, then you missed it. If you sneeze in the middle of a performance, you've missed that atomic moment, then you can't appreciate the work. It's extraordinary. Who is he composing for? Who is this person? Who is this? If you've got a call, I used to listen to Babbitt when I was a weird teenager and a crappy second-hand record player. Imagine Babbitt walking and saying, "I'm sorry, you can't." How can you listen to? What's the bandwidth of that device? And actually, oh, John, your hearing is actually quite poor as well. No, sorry, you can't. Yeah. Anyway, but maybe in the world of sound art, it's a bit different. Here's this nice paper by Robin Mino. It hasn't been mentioned much at this conference, but he's talking about the kind of lo-fi loudspeaker. Oh, Silence. Oh, the low fi- it's working? So he's, okay, in sound art, we're very happy to have speaker cones lying on floors, weirdly, whereas the whole point, but there's a huge industry to make good loudspeakers, but sound artists are obsessed with this, speaker cones everywhere. We just saw it in the past piece. This kind of lo-fi-ness, but it has a very different relationship to, when he's talking about representation, it's not about representation, etc. Let me move on. I need to talk about can I move this a bit? I just need a half a meter. Okay, Dan Dreyer. Okay, so I've made various hand dryer pieces over the years. This is my second study. This is one of my airs, hand dryer airs. The first air is an hour-long Dyson Airblade piece, which I'm now going to lock the doors and play. That's a joke. But weirdly, the thing is, it's a really annoying loud piece. But it's like I'm exploring it's an anechoic recording of a Dyson Airblade that I go to tremendous exploration over a period of an hour. And it's weird, I presented it in Nantes, and one night I did my hand dryer, talk about how evil hand dryers are, and the next day I performed this hour-long Dyson Airblade piece in the Gallery of Modern Art in Nantes with hundreds of loudspeakers, super loud. It's like I want to have my cake and eat it. I still want to have my noise hand dryer piece, but if you had sensitive hearing, then, immediately, so clearly I'm not practicing what I preach, but it's kind of coming together in this piece. So this time, I have a residency in God's Bandon, where you're going to go tonight. And I started to record this lovely Danish hand dryer called the Dan Dryer, which has this little Viking, you can't see this little red Viking guy. And he's very nationalistic because he's got this kind of the same colour as the Danish flag. So I've got to be really careful now to upset anyone who's very proud of their hand dryer. And I got particularly obsessed. Some of the Dan dryers are slightly broken, and they're much more interesting. They sound a bit like a Viking. Can I play very quickly? How long have we got? Like 1 minute left here?
We have not that much time.
Not much time.
But yeah, we can skip some questions then.
So yeah, you have to hear the Dan dryer, and I have to explain Mahler still, don't I? Is that working? Oh, no, that's my fault. So I can't stop it. So that's a slightly broken Dan dryer, but it's much more interesting than the healthy ones. So what I did was I got people to copy the sound and mimic the sound with their apparatus, firstly with their ears, because they have to be able to hear it, and then they have to respond to it. There's this nice, there's this nice concept from Tomatis about audio and phonation, about the sounds that you make and the sounds that you hear. He kind of misses out acoustics in that loop. I know Tomatis is really uncool, but it's quite nice. The idea, it says, the voice reproduces only what you can hear. Yeah, which is a kind of interesting idea. So in this piece, I've got Marie's 2-year-old child, and I've got a woman in her late 80s, and I've got 98 different voices copying the Dan Dryer sounds. Not as loud as you would actually hear them in a toilet, but everyone's doing their best to copy the sound as best they can. And then it's going to get played back in a toilet. Isn't that fantastic? As you hear tonight, all these voices are copying the Dan dryer, and there is no hand dryers in this toilet, so it's even better. And you can hear it tonight, and for me, it's a lot of interesting things that are kind of coming together there, and it's participative, but it's also kind of empowering as well. So back to Mahler. What was the point of Mahler? Yeah, so my final comment. So Mahler's Third Symphony. So Mahler always it was his holidays, and he'd build a hut. He'd be the mountains. He was in Toblach, which is in Italy, and he'd have his hut. And Mahler 3 is very famous because he's kind of running around the wilderness. He's listening to the birds and the children and the church bells and all this kind of stuff. In the Ken Russell film, you can see him running around being inspired. He's like, oh, it's fantastic. And then he goes to his hut to try to compose. But he's not in a soundproof hut. The sounds are continuing, so he gets absolutely fed up and pissed off. But Ken Russell missed a trick, Because what Mahler did was he then paid someone to shoot the birds. He did. They shot the birds.
Shit.
Isn't that shit? So let's ban Mahler. Yeah. Now he's been inspired by them. He's sublimated them, and now they just have no function anymore. Because he's trying to. I'm trying to compose, but the birds are still singing. For goodness sake. And I'm on my holidays. I've got to go and conduct, I don't know, Tannhäuser next week in somewhere, you know. But this is my composing time. The birds. So anyway, but that's the point. My point with that is a silly story, but how one's tolerance to sound changes rapidly, depending on the context, and you can imagine his adrenaline and his cortisol pumping around his body when he's trying to compose, and the birds are still singing. So my point is, you know, generally, if we're going to think about sound art matters, we can't really forget hearing. But when I mean hearing, I'm talking about audiology, the actual apparatus of our hearing, but not only our own hearing, but other people's hearing, and also the models, the theoretical models that we are using, such as Don Ida's model, or Pierre Schaeffer, or Ogoyar, or whoever. I mean, Ogoyar's and Torg's great. Les effets du sonore, what it's called. It's fantastic, but hearing is taken as done. It's like, but there's that amazing collection of ideas of terms about sound and space. It's that only work for a tiny little subgroup of healthy people. Yeah? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for only one question.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. I had some questions. So gender came up a few times. I think bathrooms are obvious places for the subject. And sort of normative listening is obviously kind of primary subject of the talk. But I wondered if gender normativity was something that you were interested in. And I asked because it's a particularly political subject in bathrooms, especially in the U.S. Not sure if anyone
Especially U.S.
has followed, but there's been particularly transphobic legislation in South Carolina, in particular, that's attempting to basically make it very difficult for transgender identified.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a rich area, and I haven't gone there because it's already a rich area. But what I am interested, because I'm a man, so I go to men's toilets or gents' toilets or whatever. But and men make extraordinary sounds in toilets. It's weird. They in Hong Kong, where I go to quite a lot, they spit and do extraordinary spitting, and they can't do it outside anymore, so they go to the toilet to spit. And also, I've asthma, so I was in the toilet. I used the opportunity to really clear my throat because it's the worst space, because it's the most reverberant space. But I had this stupid anecdote. It's a true story. I was in Heathrow Airport. I just flown in from somewhere, and I was sitting in the toilet in Heathrow Airport, thinking about the sounds that men make in toilets. And then I heard this most amazing vocal sound. And I was like, yes, exactly. Men, this is what men do in toilets. And I came out the cubicle, and Trevor Wishart was in the toilet. It's completely true. And I know it, but I didn't say, Trevor. But it's weird. But it's also the involuntary sounds are also fascinating, but maybe slightly awkward to talk about. But it's a lovely history to be written. The history of farting is a fantastic history to be written, and that's highly gendered. And also the bladder shy bowel syndrome is highly gendered. I mean, you need to watch Ally McBeal for that stuff, which is your favourite soap, I know. But no, because that was a shared toilet. Yeah, Ally McBeal.
I remember the show. I remember that.
Yeah, you don't remember the toilet? You had a shared toilet. No? Oh, come on. Anyway, sorry to embarrass you there. But no, yeah, that's all. It's really complex, and it's not. I mean, I can't do everything. I'm kind of primarily going as an acoustician, and then trying to do an artistic response, because I'm trying to. How do I communicate to these German guys who think we love it? It's so loud and powerful. We love the Dyson Airblade. How do I tell them that actually, if you're an autistic 7-year-old, that's rubbish? Yeah, that's the kind of challenge. So maybe through composition sound art, you can try to do that, or having some data. But. I'm using at the time.
Yeah. I think we have to
So we can talk.
go on.
We can talk. I'd be interested to have some responses to the installation tonight. Or you can add. You can always add some more sounds as well. It's not too late. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.